Hello and welcome to our latest Healthy Ireland at Your Library talk. Today we have with us Sinead Taylor, who is a child and adolescent counsellor. She's going to be talking to us about behaviours and emotions and how children and parents can help regulate that to improve behaviour. So Sinead, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with children?
So I work with children, teens and families, and what it does is it's given me a really strong framework of how a child's early development can have such profound impact across the lifespan. And it's all about helping families to achieve, I suppose, emotional regulation within families, and to provide families with the tips and techniques, we call it, and skills to help their families achieve regulation. And regulation is when we're feeling kind of good about ourselves and, you know, that things are going well. And if we hit a crisis or a blip in the road, that we can kind of go, okay, what's happening here, rather than reacting. So it's helping people to be responsive rather than reactive.
Lovely. Excellent. Okay, so we're talking today about children and behaviours. So can you tell us a little bit about why children misbehave?
The first stage we're going to look at is brainstem. So this is age 0 to 3.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll do a little bit of a deep dive on that. So the importance of understanding, I suppose, the development of the brain is it develops bottom to top and inside out, and it's sequential. It develops through sensory input. That's the amount of sensory data we take in. So we take in, I think, about 10 million bits of data a second. And the first area to develop is the brainstem, and that's what we'll just talk about for a minute. So this is where feelings develop. So you're a little baby and you're new, and this is all new to you. Everything is new. So, you know, when you're born, we learn to become dysregulated to get our needs met, to get fed. How does this play out in later life is that if you're a little baby, and I'm going to give an example, and you're lying in the cot and it's late at night and there's a storm and it's really windy and rainy and it's really cold, and the window opens and the rain hits the baby and the wind, and the baby is like, oh no, can I do something about this? This is a challenge. So they're going to rev it up. So they're going to start crying and screaming until the caregiver comes. But because it's new, they might perceive that, oh, this is too much. And they might just shut down in the cot. And parents might not know except when they run into the window and to shut it. So how does this play out? A couple of years later, we're in school and the window, it's a stormy day and the window blasts open and the child gets this blast of cold air. And we now have the feelings from the previous time. And the child is like, oh, I can do something about this, and it hits out or something. The child next to them, and everybody's like, what? Why did this happen? So we're going to focus on the behavior, not the why, and go behind the behavior. So that was, you know, that child, its perception was it could do something about it this time. So we'll start to get curious about behavior. Behavior is just the tip of the iceberg. So
okay.
That's the first stage.
So that's children 0 to 3. And how might that differ then in a slightly older child? So 4 plus.
Yeah, so from about age 3 to 4 up till about age 9 or 10, that's where we develop our limbic region, which is called the midbrain. I don't know if you can see my head there. And this is where we develop emotional regulation.
Okay.
This is where we learn to self-soothe. So this is where we learn to be regulated, and if a crisis happens or something happens, that we can still kind of go, oh, okay, all right, this is where we develop memory. This is where we develop context. So now we have context and memory amongst our feelings. So thing about this age group is we cannot self-regulate. We have to learn how to self-regulate. How do we do that? By the adults becoming our external regulator, showing us how to do it, because children learn by modeling. So they look around and see, you know, if you have the 4 or 5-year-old and they're playing with Lego or Duplo and they're trying to build a tower and they're so frustrated because they can't get the piece in, and they're looking around and they're like, oh, and they look over and the adult in the room is like, oh my gosh, stop. So now they're like, oh, so when I feel like this, I ramp it up even more. Or if they look over and see the adult in the room going, yes, it's so frustrating, I need to take a breath. Now the child is looking over and they're saying, oh, it's frustrating, that's my feeling, and I need to take a breath. Oh, so that's what I do with these feelings. So that's how we develop emotional regulation. That is up until around age maybe 10. So they need to be taught at that stage. And that's where we have language as well. So if you've ever spoken to a child who's dysregulated and you're like, what's up with you? They're like, I don't know. They probably haven't got the language skills, because language decreases the more dysregulated a child gets. Okay.
Okay, that's very interesting. So that's, you started to talk about, developing context and developing language. So then if we move on to the next age group, so you're sort of 11 plus, who, are sort of heading towards teenagehood and all of the challenges that brings. So what do we do? Yeah, when we're dealing with a child in that age group, sort of the tweens to teens age, how do we deal with them or engage with them then?
Okay, so this could take a very interesting turn. So the last part of the brain to develop, which is up here, this is higher thinking. Okay, this is where we can problem solve. We are logical thinking, that we can think rationally, that we can see the bigger picture. So that starts around that age, around, it's always there, but it starts to develop more as a child gets older. That's not fully developed till age 25. So that's what all the neuroscience and research is showing us in the last 20 to 25 years, is brain development is still there and going on until around age 25. So it's a higher thinking. And if you want to go down and delve, I suppose, on teens and tweens, so we always hear people saying, it's the hormones, it's the hormones. Some of that's right, but around the age of I think around maybe 12, depending on the child as well, because it's going to be individual. Mm-hmm. Children or teens and tweens start getting hits of dopamine. And that makes us like doing certain things. And it really freaks parents out because they see their children start doing certain things. So why do they start getting these hits? It's to help them move towards what they like. And it's also to help give them the courage, because this is where they're starting to develop their, I suppose, interdependence. I don't really go on independence. Interdependence is where the parent can be the parent, the teen can be the teen, and the bit we meet in the middle, that's where we can help one another out. And it's for us to start looking at their journey. And when they don't like the things that we like, it's not to take it personally. It's what we call a values clash. So that depersonalizes it. So,
okay. And Sinead, sorry, just to clarify for anyone who's not familiar, dopamine is it's a chemical produced by the body, which is basically the happy chemical. It's
yeah. And Tweens and teens, that's when it starts coming into their body. So that's when they start to move towards the things they like. It's the pain pleasure principle. So they're going to move more towards things they like and avoid things they dislike. So yeah, that's the teens and tweens.
Lovely. Okay. So, you know, you've taken us through the various stages there at which children develop and how their emotions are moving sort of from the back brain to the forebrain, if I can simplify it that way. So do children and adults then feel emotions in the same way?
The children and adults feel emotions in the same way. I would say yes, but the adults need to have a higher thinking. When children are developing, they don't know how they're feeling a lot of the time, and they need the adults' help. So we call it the setup, and it's how are we as the adults being set up to feel. So if I'm interacting with my child and I'm feeling overwhelmed, or am I feeling hopeless, or am I feeling angry, or am I feeling frustrated? That's the setup. So what is it? It's children set us up to get a felt sense of how they feel. And then they're going to watch us and see how we handle that feeling. And they're going to use this information to learn how to manage their own feelings. So by watching how we handle an emotion, they learn how to work with the feelings, because emotion is the feelings and energy in the body.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yes. So, you know, let's say it's very important then for an adult to be as aware of their emotions as they are of a child's emotions. So what are the steps a parent can take to help their child improve their behavior?
So the steps a parent can take, the first thing is we regulate ourselves. We get curious about how we're feeling. Because if we're going by the premise of the setup, and if we're starting to feel dysregulated, it's get curious about how we're feeling. And then we can name it, and you can name it to yourself. So if you're feeling angry and we name it, it doesn't take away the feeling, it reduces the intensity. So we name it. So it's like, I feel so angry. That was very calmly said the way I said that, actually. And then we take a breath, because now we're giving information back to the child. We're naming how we're feeling, thereby giving them information. And we're going to take a breath, and now they know what to do next.
Okay.
Or it might be that, you know, some people do that, or, you know, grounding themselves, or saying, I need to take a walk, I need a cup of tea. The things that work for you to help you come back to higher thinking.
So are you, do you express that to the child? Do you actually say out loud, I'm so annoyed right now, and, you know, take a breath in front of them so that they learn that that's what it is? Or is this, are you saying this to yourself? You know, is it an internal?
You say it out loud. I can give an example. One Sunday, a couple of weeks ago, I had been out for a run, so I knew I was in a good mood. I knew it. And I was driving a young person afterwards to training. And within 2 minutes of sitting in the car, I had this feeling that I couldn't open my mouth. I don't know if anyone's had that feeling. I feel like I can't open my mouth. And then I was getting curious. I was like, whoa, oh, you were in a good place like 5 minutes ago. What is going on? And then I went, I feel like I can't open my mouth. And the person beside me just, me too. So I just put my hand on their leg and I went, okay, have you had breakfast? No. And we are getting you some food. So that's another thing I think parents, when a child gets dysregulated, but does that understand that's the setup? and I was able to show empathy and get food, because I'm going to throw in a halts. When a child gets dysregulated, if you just even think halt, take a stop, take a breath. Are they hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed? Hungry is first one. A lot of the time, children are hungry. And what they don't realize is, when they get those rumblings in their tummy, they don't realize that's hunger and they think it's anxiety. But once they start to think it's anxiety, then we have the stress cycle starting, which is going to release cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And the child's brain is going to say, whoa, you're in danger, you're in danger, you're in danger. Ramp it up. The child's going to get more anxious, whereas in reality, the child is hungry.
That's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. And it's not just children, because adults are exactly the same. You can see it when people have that sort of, what we call it in my house is hangry. It's the hungry, angry thing.
So that's how the setup works. I think that's a pure description, because that young person in my car had no breakfast on the way to training and then a match and was worried. So
very good. That's very good. So let's say that was very good example of kind of identifying a parent, identifying the situation. So let's say you have a different situation. So maybe you have a child who behaves really well for everyone else, but suddenly when their parent comes back, they have a meltdown, or they're very good in school, but then they come home and for some reason they just go crazy. So what's happening there, and how can a parent sort of help identify what the problem is and then resolve it with the child?
So we're going to look at this in maybe about 3 little stages. And I've written down 3 so that I don't go off track. So what's happening there is, if a child has a meltdown when they get home, is you have a child whose perception, wherever else they were, be it in school, be it in a club, and they're really quiet and they're the compliant child, is that they're probably stuck in freeze at school. So we have fight, flight, freeze. So freeze is where I perceive a challenge and I can do something about it. Am I going to rev it up? Or I perceive a challenge and I can not do something about it. Am I going to slam on the brakes and we're stuck? So we're super quiet, but we have as much nervous system activation going on as the child with the biggest behaviors in class. So when we get home, can you just imagine if tapping your hands all day is the way you get regulated, and you're told wherever you are, oh no, stop fidgeting, put your hands, be quiet, and you can't do that. You can't get regulated with what you need. You can't move your body. Children are meant to be able to move their bodies. So when you get home and you're in that safe place, because they would not be able to do it unless they had a perception of safety.
Okay.
They are just de-stressing from being that, child stuck in freeze all day, a lot of the time. It's obviously going to vary, with individual children. So how can the parent help with this? So we regulate ourselves. We remember that when a child is dysregulated, they're down in brainstem. So their thinking brain isn't on. So we can't get curious with them at that moment. We can't say, what's going on? Hey, maybe we'll try this. Maybe we'll try this. So we just relate to them. You're having a really hard time. We show compassion, even when sometimes it doesn't feel like we want to be compassionate. And change happens in reflection. Getting curious afterwards, like me with that car incident, that evening, you know, when we're like watching a movie or something, and it's, you know, earlier, I'm just wondering, you know, this not having breakfast, you know, have you noticed how you seem to get sad? So we start linking behavior and feelings to different things. Like I've linked it now. When you're feeling sad, you've missed breakfast. So that seems to happen. So we get curious.
Okay,
And
and
getting
you're
curious,
guiding the child then to make those connections effectively.
yeah. And we get curious with children because curiosity takes children out of brainstem and back up to higher thinking. So this is something that you have to do time and time again, because it needs to become a pattern.
Okay.
So,
and so let's say you've said there, and I think it's a good point, is not necessarily to try and engage at the point when the child is in a very high stress mode. It's, you know, there's no point trying to get curious then. But should a parent ignore bad behavior then? If a child is acting out, do you just walk away and kind of go, I can't deal with you now, and leave it, and then come back to them later on? Do you ignore? Do you interact? What's the best way to address it?
okay, so there's two trains of thought on this one. So if you're a child and you're developing, everything is going to be new. Okay. And if you're having really big feelings and you don't know what to do with them, and the people that you care most about turn away from you, you're going to probably develop, oh, it's me, it's my behavior, I'm bad. So if we need to be shown what to do with these big challenging behaviors, and I just want to touch on that, on challenging behaviors. As adults, we tend to focus on the challenging behavior. So we tend to label the challenging behavior. So we tend to say the shy child, the quiet child, the angry child, I'm not talking about necessarily negative labels, but we do label children. The studious child, the bookworm, all these things. But when we do that, we miss everything else with that child.
So let's say you're trying to engage with your child. You tried doing the empathy and taking a breath, and they're still not listening. What do you do then?
We regulate ourselves, do it all again and again. And if they're still not listening, it means that they feel they're not being heard. That's their perception. So I'm going to give, and is it okay if I give another little example?
Yes,
so
please.
I use what's called synergetic play therapy, and Lisa Dean, who designed and founded it, gives a fantastic example of you have a child and they're crying in the cot, okay? And you walk over and you look in at this crying child and you go, oh, I see you're crying. That's good. So what do you think that baby's going to do?
Cry louder.
Okay, and I go back over and I go, oh, you're crying louder. Okay, I think you might be sad. So what's that baby going to do next?
Scream.
Okay, that baby's going to keep ramping it up until they feel seen, heard, and valued. And when you pick up a screaming baby, am I going to pick up the screaming baby and go, oh, you're sad? No, we're going to rock the baby. We're going to match the emotion. And then we're going to rock the baby. And then we're going to, it's okay. And we're going to breathe, And we're now co-regulating. We're the external regulator, and we're showing the baby how to soothe. So if a child isn't listening, their perception is they're not being heard. So how do we work with that? So we reflect back the child's experience. So we call it. So how would that look? And I use this for adults as well. So, so it's when your child is telling you something that is emotionally important to them, we need to actively listen and reflect back their perception of the experience, not our opinion and not our perception. So I don't know if you'd like me to give you an example of how that would look.
Yeah, could you give me an example of how it might work with an older child rather than a baby? So you've given a great example there of, you know.
Oh, I've got a really good example.
Yeah.
So your teenager comes out of school and says, such and such is such and such and such and such, and I am never going back there again, and I am sick of them all. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, normally you really like this person, so I don't know what's going on here. And maybe they were having a bad day, so that's all in my head. So what I need to do is go, okay, have I got this right? Such and such is such and such, and you're never going back to that again because of such and such. Okay, have I got it right? Yeah. Okay. So maybe your friend was having a bad day. Note, I've reflected back their experience.
Okay.
Exactly as they said it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Without jumping in and saying, oh, that language is really not appropriate. Or maybe your friend was having a bad day, because that would be my perception. So it is about perception, and it's about reflecting back the child or teen's experience. So, you know, I don't want to go back to karate anymore because I hate it. Have I got that right? You don't want to go back to karate anymore because you hate it? Okay, maybe you were just hungry. Maybe you're having a bad day. Again, reflect back the child's experience, the teen's experience. Then we can give how we feel about it. Because so often we want to jump in and fix it.
Okay, so reflecting back, actually saying out loud effectively what the child has said to you.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so that demonstrates empathy and an understanding of what they're going through and allows them to feel heard.
Feels they've now been heard and valued for their perception of the experience. It's like if you have, you know, conversations and say, oh, that's kind of, yeah, I don't want to give in to them or it'll make it worse. And no, if you meet a child's needs, so if you have a child who's like saying, you know, primary school child or whatever, and I want to be picked up, I'm tired, I want to be picked up, I'm tired. Well, if you pick the child up, you've met the need, so they probably won't have to ask again because they know if they ask, that need will be met. Whereas if you have a child that's going, pick me up, I'm tired. No, you're too heavy now. Pick me up, I'm tired. No, it's too, or, you know, what you could do is that child's going to keep asking. So it's afterwards when you get curious with the child, so, you know, when you were asking me to pick you up, you know, I'm 5'5", you're 5 foot. It's just not going to really happen, but I get that you were tired. So, you know, you can get curious and explain it. So now the child knows why you can't pick them up, and it's been understood.
Okay.
It's a boundary as well.
So I suppose if you know, that's an example there where the child is looking for something specific, which you may or may not be able to accommodate. So, you know, if you're a parent and you have another child with you and you can't necessarily pick up the child, is it good to compromise? You know, do we, you know, stop somewhere, sit down, I put the other child on my knee and then pick up the one who's asking to be picked up?
Yeah, collaboration always works with children because, again, they're being seen, heard, and valued. And it's like, hey, what do you think we can do? We're getting curious. What do you think we can do? Shall we all sit down and take a break? Do you think you're feeling hungry? Is it time for a snack? You know, collaboration, it's a buy-in. It's meeting It's helping them get their needs met and having a part in it. And it's, if we go back to earlier and we start linking things that children do to when they get dysregulated, like, you know, some children might bounce on a ball, some children might jump on the couch. So you start linking, oh, you know, when you get really angry, you always go and jump on the couch. You start linking things that they like to do to get regulated. And collaboration is, it's fantastic. And I touched on boundaries earlier, and I find, don't be too rigid with boundaries. And my boundaries are always where I feel I'm about to lose it. So I'm like, oh, okay, why am I feeling like this? And that's where you put the boundary in, because we're the adults.
Okay, you made a point earlier on that children's brains are not fully developed until they're about 25.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting, because we tend to think that, you know, as someone becomes a teenager, that now we need to start treating them like an adult. And, you know, you're a grown up now, you know, we expect them to understand the consequences of their actions and to be able to regulate themselves. But if they're not fully developed until 25, that would seem to indicate that really we still need to be parenting them quite strongly until they're, you know, in their early 20s, and giving them a lot of guidance, you know, maybe not behaving as if they are, you know, a young child, but very much still guiding what they're doing. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it is. It's always to remember that we can think of consequences. So if you have your teen and, you know, they're going gorge jumping, which is like smaller cliff jumping or something like that, the adults, we're going to be thinking maybe we should have someone down at the end in case, you know, someone gets into difficulty. Maybe, you know, we should have someone down checking the depth of the water. You know, maybe it's not the wisest thing to do. So we're thinking big picture thinking, higher thinking. They're thinking jump, 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 jump. I need to go home. I told Mom I'd be home 10 minutes ago. Oh, no, friends. Oh, so it's called just thinking. They don't have it. So if we go back to the premise that children and teens do well when they can. And why do we go back to that? Oh, well, I go back to that premise because doing well is always preferable to not doing well. And I want us to start thinking as adults, have we ever set out to not do well? So if we're not doing well on something, there's going to be a reason. It might be they're dysregulated, that they're gone back into brainstem. And yeah, with teens especially, that we would go, oh, they were able to do it yesterday. You tidied your room yesterday. How come it'd be so bad today? And it's like, because they're not up here. And it's like, you know, and I do say, do you really want to fall out with your child over a pair of socks? Or do you want to be the person that your teen can phone at 2 o'clock in the morning when they've made some tricky choices? So it's just to remember that, you know, we do well when we can, and they're teens, so they are developing. There's 2 times in our lifespan that there's the most brain development happening, and that's teens and toddlers. So, you know, they have an awful lot of neural activity going on. They have new train tracks being laid. So that's the things they're going to move towards, that they're going to like more. With teens as well, you know, a lot of the time, I don't know if there's any specific questions you'd like to ask me about them.
I think, I suppose it's really that we should be encouraging them maybe not to be making permanent choices when they're teenagers. So, you know, that tattoo might seem like a really great idea. But, you know, when you're in your 30s, your 40s, and the skin is suddenly stretched there, it mightn't be so great. Or, you know, I guess, how do we engage with them in a way that's not telling them, you know, because if you tell a teenager no, they're pretty much guaranteed that they're going to go and do whatever you've told them not to. So if we want them to, I guess, consider the consequences of their actions, and you're saying they don't necessarily have the same capacity as an adult to do that, so they can't, they may think they've considered all the elements of something, but realistically, if I'm understanding you correctly, they're really only considering a very small portion because their brain doesn't yet have the capacity to see the bigger picture. So, you know, the tattoo, the tongue piercing, whatever it is, that, you know, if we want to guide them not to do that, how do we do that without just coming the heavy?
Okay. So we redirect instead of making it stop. That is, unless it's a safety issue, because they're going towards, they're getting those dopamine hits. And I want you to start thinking about it. It's telling the dopamine to stop won't work. So while they're craving the dopamine hit because they really admire someone who's got all these tattoos and they want to get a tattoo, it's going to make them want to do it more. So we need to find something that is workable for the parents and the team. So if your teenager, you know, likes to dress a certain way and we don't like it, and we're like, oh, no, don't do that. We're inadvertently telling them that the urges in them to dress that way are wrong or bad. So this is where we need to dig deep into where we come from and get curious about, well, what is it about my values that I don't like what you're wearing? So the more we try to suppress them from following who they want to be, and this is them trying to figure out their authentic self, and it's not easy to be authentic. I want us to reflect and think about, that's us because we're scared. Okay, we want to start creating win-wins. So it might be the teenager that wants to color their hair in 50 million ways, which I have personal experience of. The win-win might be that they go to the hairdresser for me rather than do it themselves, so that they're not messing around buying bleach on the internet and stuff. The win-win might be that, you know, okay, well, what is it that you like about tattoos? You know, the child that's online all the time. The win-win might be exploring why they like that video game, why they like tattoos. It might be the design, it might be the creativity of the tattoo. We don't know. It's to take a bit of a deep dive and see what's going on. It is really trying to redirect instead of trying to make it stop. So rather than, you know, going off on a night that, you know, where we don't know where you are because we don't want you to go, it might be us digging deep, going, oh, I really don't want them to go. What is this bringing up for me? And it might be, okay, you know, I get that you want to go. I'm really unsure about it because I'm your parent. How about I bring you and collect you? So there's going to be compromise. Behaviors, they're just on their own journey, because up until maybe about age of 12, children, they ingest our values, our beliefs, and now they're getting, you know, the courage to start kind of trying to find their own path. And it's values, and they're trying to figure out themselves. And I'm going to give you a really good example of values. I was driving a young person to a party, and I just wanted, this person is over 18, but I'm driving them to a party, and I asked them a question, and I'm saying, so how's that theory test thing going as I'm driving to the party? Mm-hmm. They're like, No, I'm not too bothered about it. And I'm like, oh. And they say, well, actually, I think it's more important to you. And I'm kind of going, okay, as I'm driving you to the party. And they're like, yeah, but I don't mind getting the bus.
Mm.
So that's when they turned around and said, we're just having a values clash, Mum. That's all we're having. So it was really important to me as a teenager to be able to drive because of where I lived. To my teen, it's not even on the radar. So do you see where I'm saying we bring up our own stuff?
Yes.
So why is it so important to me?
Very good.
And it's values. But till about age 12, they ingest everything from us, and now they're getting the courage to discover who they really are themselves.
Right.
So,
Sinead, thank you so much. I think we'll leave it there. You have given us so much to think about, which is really brilliant, because I think you've covered every stage of childhood and some great ideas there. For anyone who's watching, just to let you know, the libraries have a range of parenting books available, from a pre-birth all the way through. So if there's anything you need, please do drop in. Excuse me. We have print books. We also have ebooks available through our Borrow Box systems. This is our last Healthy Ireland talk for 2021. So thank you very much to Sinead for being our last speaker. Thank you to everyone who has participated in our Healthy Ireland series this year. And we will begin again in 2022. So we hope you will rejoin us then. Thank you very much.